You're listening to the Onside Podcast, the podcast for innovation-driven entrepreneurship here in Atlantic Canada. I'm your host, Alex McCann, and this is Season 2, Episode 13. And in this episode, we are taking a look at the space and satellite industry growing here in Nova Scotia. Our guest today is Steve Mattier, founder, CEO, and director of Maritime Launch Services. Steve is the visionary and driving force behind Maritime Launch. A mechanical engineer by training, Steve is a skilled international spaceport licensing specialist. As an expert analyst of spaceports and launch vehicles, Steve shares extensive knowledge and experience in matching clients with the infrastructure and technology to meet their business needs. A former NASA contractor, Steve is the recipient of the prestigious Silver Snoopy Award for excellence in flight safety and mission success. Well, Steve, thanks so much for joining us at the Onside Podcast. I'm really excited and happy to have you here, especially there's so many interesting things going on in the space world today. But as we kind of get started, could you give us a little bit of your background? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Who is Steve?
Oh, well, thank you for the invitation to be here. I really do appreciate it. So I've been 32 years in the industry. The space industry started in New Mexico with a bachelor's of science in mechanical engineering, went to work at the NASA White Sands test facility, worked there for 16 years in the space shuttle program, which was really fun and a blast in every meaning
Literally.
of the word. It was a rocket propulsion test facility that was initially built in the 60s as a part of the Apollo era. So there's all that history of Apollo and going on around, as well as the space shuttle program. So I was an engineering manager there for quite a number of years, and then branched out, building on that, and went independent as a consultant. And as a consultant, I was hired to do a lot of different studies and work on a lot of different business proposals for NASA and other contractors. And one in particular was to look for a spaceport location in North America that could serve this burgeoning satellite market in the trajectory that people want to put satellites. And did that study in 2016. And that's what really brought me to Nova Scotia. We started a project, found the location, got some seed funding, did an environmental assessment, and have been moving forward with that development. So my family and I, my two daughters of the six, the two youngest daughters, have moved here with me, and Anne and I have been here for 4 years now, 4 winters, I should say.
4 winters, yes. How have you adjusted to being in Nova Scotia from New Mexico? I imagine it's a little bit different.
It is definitely different. Probably the biggest thing is spring is so short here and winter is so long, hangs on so long. In New Mexico, we certainly have tomatoes on the vine in June, and we're looking for leaves just to join the fray here in June in Nova Scotia. So it's not that the winters are so much colder, or because we live in the northern part of the state, part of the Rocky Mountain chain, the Sandia Mountains there. So we see some snow in the cold, but it's just the length of winter seems to drag on forever. So
I remember when I first moved here. I've been in Halifax for a while, and I did not really realize that spring was so long, or the cold season was so long. I remember trying, I think in late May, to go buy some flowers, to plant in the yard. And I remember going to the Home Depot, and the woman was like, "Oh, my dear, you need to come back towards the end of June. Like you're way too early." She took pity on me. She redirected me to some house plants. Yeah. Well, that's great. So how did you you've had this illustrious kind of career working with space shuttle and in space, but what actually kind of got you excited or inspired to go into this industry in the first place? How did you even think about it?
Well, it was an opportunity coming out of college in the simplest sense in New Mexico, not too far from where I went to school in Albuquerque, and landed this opportunity. But the opportunity to work on the space shuttle program was really, really quite awesome. To be a part of that environment of putting astronauts into space and being able to meet astronauts and walk up and down the space shuttle cargo bay in Kennedy Space Center and just be a part of that really lit that fire for me. And what I found is it's ended up helping me build a resume for the future, being able to operate a rocket test facility, learning the ropes in the business development and aspects that come along with entrepreneurial startups. Started my own business and moving forward that it was just putting together all those pieces that really brought me forward to today.
And speaking about being an entrepreneur, was there something that kind of got you excited about being an entrepreneur in this space? Like what led you to branch off from kind of, I would say, a 9-to-5 job, even if it's as exciting as working for NASA and working on programs and contracts and things like that? What kind of inspired you to say, I think I want to start a business doing this?
Well, it really has to do with the industry itself. It's going through so many significant changes from the space shuttle era. The last space shuttle mission was in 2011. And space got ceded to commercial industry, basically, by governments. That's when the SpaceXs and those other companies started coming online and started trying to build rockets and do stuff. So low Earth orbit became the place where people wanted to be with their satellites instead of the larger geosynchronous orbit satellites that go around the equator. Now you can put them in low Earth orbit 1,000 kilometers up instead of 30,000 and have them be 1/100th the size even. So technology changes and the opening up of that market to commercial, I think, is really what it got me interested in really being a part of it.
And you said that your journey brought you to this in 2016. Is that when you came to Nova Scotia? Was it that in 2016 or shortly thereafter when you decided to move forward with the Maritime Launch?
Actually, I was hired to do a study because of my resume, working for NASA and working in the space sector itself as a private entrepreneur, to do a study to try to identify a location in North America. So I looked at 13, 14 different locations, everywhere from Newfoundland, Churchill, Manitoba, Sheet Harbor, Canso, up and down the East Coast, West Coast. I was on a beach in Chiapas, Mexico with the Mexican Space Agency looking at places like that.
I bet that was nice and sunny.
It was, yeah. There was some interesting stories there in Alaska, Hawaii. Anyway, so I did this study and I was looking at 14 or 15 different elements of how you down select one. First one being safety. Safety to the local public, safety downrange. It's got to be coastal because stages have to be able to be planned to return, et cetera. So it was through that study that we identified the location in Canso to really be the one that worked. And then I was able to find a first investor and we got the company started here, tagged up with Stuart McKelvey. They opened the firm for us and we got that ball rolling. Again, it really did fundamentally start with safety for the local population and for the downrange where the rocket's going to go, and then everything else falls in place after that. You have to look at community support. You have to look at all these other elements that go into it. Do you have infrastructure nearby? Are there seaports? Is there power, water, community infrastructure? All those kinds of things that go into really defining what you need to build a spaceport. And it came up really green checks in all those boxes.
So the location made a huge difference. Is there something that's going on kind of in Canada and that's also kind of making it an interesting time to set something up or to go further down in this industry? Like what's happening that's going on in the industry in Canada that makes it an exciting time?
Well, we've had a very robust satellite manufacturing capability across the country with MDA, Telesat, and many, many others. But all of those satellites have to be shipped somewhere else to be launched. There was actually a study done by John Chapman back in the 60s, and he had some output from that study that said, hey, build a space agency, check. Build a satellite company, Telesat, check. But what got lost in his piece was he said, don't build a large rocket launch facility, let the U.S. do it. But he did recognize the need and pushed for a small rocket launch facility. That last part got lost in the shuffle. So there's never actually ever been a push to build an orbital launch capability in Canada. But the market has changed. And so we've got this great infrastructure already, all these satellites that are being built, and they're being shipped somewhere else to go into space. So now if you've got a location where the market wants to put them, which is what CANSO really represents, then you've got the perfect location to actually build a spaceport to deliver those satellites, Canadian, U.S., international satellites into orbit.
You were kind of mentioning a little bit about the infrastructure that's required, kind of that's ideal, I guess, in Nova Scotia. So the ports, the facilities. What was kind of like because I'm sure there's probably other places as well, but was there something particular that was very unique about the location in Nova Scotia that was different than some of the other places that you identified? I mean, I'm sure Mexico would have been lovely. Maybe it's sunnier there more times of the year. Is there something like that's particularly unique about Nova Scotia that made it an ideal location?
The location that people want to put their satellites has changed from geosynchronous type orbits for large satellites into polar and sun synchronous orbits, almost due south or due north, if you will. And then inclinations up to 45, 55 degrees. So from CANSO up to basically off the coast of Africa. So that huge range of inclinations in one spot is really important for where satellites want to be when they get into orbit for doing their job. So these satellites are about global broadband, near Earth imaging, Internet of Things, remote control of vehicles, all the growing industry, which is monstrous. It's $400 billion a year U.S. today and growing at 3 to 5%, headed for $1 trillion. And it's all about getting satellites from the ground and into space. And into space means where into space. So they're building these constellations that are not 1, 2, 3, but 10 to thousands of satellites that communicate to each other and down to the Earth in the range of inclinations that we have from CANSO.
That is so fascinating. I mean, I think that probably most people don't even realize that maritime launches operate, if you're, not within the industry, but I would say most people don't really even realize that maritime launch is here. And you had some very interesting, exciting news that was announced yesterday in the press. Do you want to share a little bit about that? Like what's happening?
Yeah. Well, I mentioned we really started this initiative with safety analysis and really first principles in 2016. And we held our first open house in the community of CANSO in 2017, January of 2017. Explaining to the community what we're doing, getting their input, willing to walk away, not really trying to force anything on anyone. And it was only as a result of their support for this initiative and what it could offer that we went forward and in March of that year made the announcement for the site selection. So in 2017, right after that selection, we initiated an environmental assessment process. That EA registration was done in 2017. And the province came back and said, this is all cool, but it's a rocket launch facility. How about you tell us a little more? So they assigned us with what's called a focus report. And we had to provide an enormous amount of additional information to the province for them to analyze and really consider this project. We got that approved in June of 2019. With that approval was quite a laundry list of things that needed to get done. Wildlife management plan, bird studies, wetland mitigation plans, all kinds of things that we've been working on since then. We've done close to 65 different bird studies out there. So we've done our due diligence really to, flora, fauna, lichen, you name it. We've looked for it out there and worked through that process where we have gotten now the approval to start construction. The land we're using is called Crown Land, and we had leased, had an application to lease 335 acres that also got approved about week and a half ago. So
I saw that.
the land lease is in place. The EA is approved now for start of construction, and we're off to the races.
That is really exciting. And I know that in different kinds of industries, I especially know from the wind industry, for example, getting environmental assessments or other kinds of industries, that can be a very long process, but is very important to do, because once something goes up, it's really hard to backtrack if there's any kind of environmental issues. I guess I'm imagining there's folks are concerned about sort of the environmental impact of where you're placing the facility itself. But I guess maybe was there some concern around the launching of rockets or things like that, and how that might affect communities in terms of any emissions or fuel spillage or those kinds of things. I guess that those are the kinds of things that are usually kind of thought of, but you've worked through that process to get that cleared up.
Yeah, and indeed, and it's all published. It's on the Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change website with the focus report, for example, which was really drilling down into worst case scenarios, maximum quantities of propellants, worst case, and really looking at the global footprint. This isn't the first spaceport built on Earth.
Right.
There's many of them in the U.S. and South America and India, et cetera. And so there's a lot of information to draw on for that. And we really were able to pull together a comprehensive analysis to provide that understanding. We had presentations that we made to Nova Scotia Environment, Department of Natural Resources, Environment and Climate Change, the federal level as well.
You've done it all.
And that was just to get the focus report done.
Yeah.
And then following that, of course, working through all of these other additional studies, and our efforts to date have been quite significant. We've pulled, experts from my contacts in the U.S. at spaceports, because of my industry that I was in down there, from locations that have supported spaceport launches for many, many years, East Coast, West Coast, so you name it, working with rocket fuels, NASA, et cetera. And we brought them up here. They helped us write some of the material. They also participated in open houses that we had in the community, poster boards with them standing next to them, explaining to the community what we're doing. And I think that's probably been the strength of our project, is really being open about everything, good, bad, and the ugly, and having the experts there that can answer those questions. We've done 4 open houses over the years, and have really been grateful for that community support.
Well, it's interesting, and I love hearing about kind of the engagement with the community, also the focus on environmental concerns. Everybody, wants to make sure we're minimizing any kind of environmental impact and damage to the planet, and getting that sort of community buy-in. What do you think is like the opportunity in Canada for this industry and this sector? I know you're involved in a lot of different things, and you've brought experts here. You're on various councils and things like that. And I know you're mostly focused kind of on what's happening here in Nova Scotia and with Maritime Launch specifically. But is there a broader sort of opportunity in Canada? We're talking about low orbit satellites and all the talk about going back to the moon and, Canada Arm. And, we have quite a, robust kind of aerospace defense sort of industry. Like what are some things that you're seeing or you think might be opportunities related to this sector for Canada?
All of the companies that are across Canada that are building satellites and coming up with innovation at the universities, et cetera, they're really active right now. There's, the synthetic aperture radar satellites. There's other kinds of satellite technologies that are helping us in the climate change issues. For example, monitoring for methane leaks out west. And if you can monitor and you can find them, then you can stop them. So there's a whole environmental component to this thing that I think is important, that we're real true leaders on. And we're worried about the poles, and we're close to the poles, and we have an obligation up north to monitor them. And it's natural, I think, for Canada to be focused on what is going up in the North Pole in particular. And so having a launch location that can put satellites over the poles like we have, I think is an important addition to our capability. So, the federal government has been wonderfully supportive in this initiative and this development. They've really come around and warmed to the idea that, we do need domestic launch capability. I think there was some lessons that came out of COVID, where we had to, ramp up production of material, vaccinations, and that weren't existing. And it's like, okay, maybe we should take stock of where we are with respect to things like space and having a domestic launch capability. I've met with members of DND as well, and Space Agency, Global Affairs, and I said Transport Canada is the regulatory body, by the way. So across the board in the federal government, I think there's a real recognition that it's time. It's our time. And with this market that is just going bananas, there is no reason why we have to be, small thinking about this. There's a number of ministers, federal ministers, that have been very vocal about the potential for what this also brings. We're part of what's called Space Canada. It's a group that's recently formed to try to promote development in Canada, and we're one of the founding members of that. And pleased to be a part of that. If you got satellite manufacturers and a launch vehicle company, one of my colleagues in the industry is this vision of a pan-Canada offering where we can design, develop satellites, launch satellites, and then help them with the data stream on the backside of it, a full market offering from concept to data at the other end, coming from Canada in one offering. And I think that's really powerful.
That's actually really interesting when you're talking about kind of every guest that we have here has a COVID kind of impact story about how this moment in time changed their perspective, either in their own business or in the industry, or reassess what the opportunity is. And I definitely think in Canada, or the world globally, realized we hadn't had a point in time where borders were shut down, and the need to build up capacity, whether it was around food security. I remember there was an issue about would we have enough food in Nova Scotia,
or
because
paper towls, right?
Paper towels. Yes.
Right.
Or flour. Yeah. I remember going to, all of these kinds of things. And we definitely saw it in the vaccine industry and getting vaccines, even though there's a lot of biotech capability in Canada, suddenly not being able to access either the ingredients or supplies or things like that to manufacture, or have the facilities to do that. And that's kind of an ongoing thing. But I guess what I'm kind of hearing is that there was a bit of an opportunity to move ahead with the satellite spaceport kind of industry in Canada, but maybe it sounds like COVID sort of brought it a little bit more into focus, that maybe now is the moment and we need to build up more capacity here.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. That's exactly right. And when you have companies like Telesat that are intending to build a global constellation for broadband, I think that's a really important aspect. Giving communication opportunities to the rural parts of Canada, being, up in the middle of nowhere and up on the Skyline Trail, then being able to get Wi-Fi, for example, would be pretty awesome, right? And that's what you get. Interestingly, right, I was up in the schools of Canso in June, working with the schools, doing some presentations to 3 different classes, and everybody knew about Starlink. SpaceX's version of it. And some of these kids, their parents have that. So while it's not operating to any maximum capacity or capability, people are recognizing that they can get global broadband from satellites, and it's in their backyard that it's happening. So that's an important part, right? If you can provide that, it doesn't care what the weather is outside. If you have power to your computer and you've got an internet connection, you can communicate. And I think that's really an important tool for us as well.
Yeah, I think the opportunity for rural connection is really interesting and really important, and that's been something that we've been looking at as well. It's funny, when you were talking earlier, I was just remembering I was just on the phone trying to talk to somebody who was up in Cape Breton, and they were driving down, and we had to get off the phone about 3 or 4 times just so they're like, wait a minute, I have to get to the next town, then I can talk to you for another 10 minutes or so, and then speed it along. But I think that connectivity and finding the right kind of infrastructure that can support folks in different places, whether it's in rural parts of Canada or across Africa or, other places where infrastructure is it's a lot harder to put infrastructure in a jungle or in the forest or places like that. And some of that on-the-ground infrastructure makes it a lot more challenging, which is why satellites provide a very interesting kind of global connective fiber, I guess.
Indeed, yes.
That gives us all sort of this really interesting kind
connectivity.
of connectivity. I feel so cliche always talking about connectivity, but especially in a world where we've never been so connected, but also so apart.
Right.
That's probably like another.
There's a whole nother episode there.
That's like a whole nother I have this whole thing I've been thinking about for a while. Is like, how do you build connection and community across a distributed environment? And I feel like with COVID, this has never been more topical or relevant. So I find that whole discussion really, really interesting. One of the things I love about this industry is that it is so cutting edge. It almost, with SpaceX and the work that you're doing, and I don't know if people have watched, there's a show, it's called For All Mankind. Have you seen this show? It's a space show. Okay, I have to admit, I'm like a bit of a sci-fi nerd, so I will watch anything that has to do with sci-fi, but you should watch it. It's basically kind of it's an imagined future of the U.S. trying to get to the moon, but we're not the first. The Russians are the first. And so it's this kind of alternative history. But what's interesting about it is all of the technological advancements that are created for just the opportunity to pursue space. So whether it's the internet or new materials or things like that, it's this drive kind of towards the future. I kind of got a little lost there. They're trying to get to Mars and all this other kind of stuff. But it's really sort of an interesting look at, what you can do towards the future and all of the kinds of industries and things like that follow along when you're, moving towards this goal of literally reaching for the stars and sort of beyond. What do you think is for rural Nova Scotia kind of reaching for the stars? What are some of the kind of local opportunities that could be fostered kind of on the ground as your company is starting to get off the ground? Are there things that folks could, that they haven't imagined yet that could be kind of I don't want to say a gateway towards the stars, but a gateway to, what's going to be happening next? Does the space industry create space for new kinds of industries or jobs or opportunities? Like, what are some of the things that could follow behind, I guess, in the wake of the space industry?
So I would draw your attention to Halifax and what its main core is in the shipbuilding. And what has happened as a result of shipbuilding is this whole bedroom community of support of engineering, manufacturing capabilities, universities, the waterfront, all the stuff that came from that, and the tourism itself too. At the end of the day, beginning of the day, we are a seaport, and that's how things started. Much the same is true for a spaceport. We're going to operate safely, environmentally friendly, and we're not glamorous. We're about getting satellites where our customers want them safely and on time and at an affordable price. And by keeping our nose down the UPS drivers of space, right? I mean, it's about getting it on the doorstep where they want it. By focusing on the inside of the fence, that leaves the outside of the fence as a huge opportunity. People are bringing satellites here by the dozens, by the hundreds, by the thousands. Now suddenly one breaks and needs a repair. You need a manufacturing capability nearby. You need to be able to do testing of them before they're accepted onto the vehicle itself, right? So, shaker tables, thermal vac chambers, all kinds of high-end equipment that goes into checking out satellites. Now, satellite clients that are building them by the tens, the hundreds, of the thousands, they would like to have them co-located to where they're going to be launched. So now you've got this opportunity just down the road where you've got the manufacturing capability. And we have such a robust university infrastructure with Cape Breton University, et cetera, St. Francis Xavier University, Dalhousie, and beyond. I don't mean to not name all of them, right? But that capability is really quite robust. So now, and they're involved in space. There's a group at Dal that are building a CubeSat that's going to go up on the International Space Station.
Oh, neat.
It's part of a CCP program that the Canadian Space Agency fostered. So there's all this opportunity, I think, that is happening across Nova Scotia and across Canada to help bring that to bear. We're also working with the First Nations community. The Bakankeq are the closest community to the spaceport location. They were one of my first stops in 2017 as well, meeting with them and talking to them about what this opportunity can mean and be for them. So it was really important, I think, that they see some of the potential opportunities that come with this as well. The Space Agency has opened up a program here, a STEM program, to focus on First Nations and STEM opportunity development. So I think there's a real groundswell already that's underway. And then at the end of the day, you look at how we need to operate the site. And you'll look at the trades that are required. This is right out of my playbook or NASA facility. 80% of the 90% of the people are not geeky people with slide rules. They are, nobody knows what a slide rule is today anymore.
I only know what that is because of watching that show I was telling you about. I get all my science information from sci-fi, but keep going.
So the backbone of the site are trades kinds of things. They're plumbers, pipe fitters, electricians, there's welders, mechanics, welders, etc. Environmental folks, IT, all the kinds of things that you need to operate a place. The technicians are mechanical, electrical. They all come from trades that are very close to what is already happening, whether it's LNG or other kinds of things like that. I've looked at the Nova Scotia Community College course list, for example, and I can build most of my training courses from the courses that are already offered. So it's really interesting. We've got Aerospace and Defense Association here. They haven't thought about space so much, but you take that workforce and you point them in this direction a little bit, and it fits really quite well. So now it's about finishing off that with a training and comprehensive OJT programs on top of the training that they have in place. So I think it's really already ready to go. And then even including, firefighters and security guards, et cetera. So it really covers the waterfront.
Wow. That was a lot. I was just imagining all of these people and all of the different kinds of trades and industries that are kind of like filtering up or filtering down to make all of this happen. Because you're right, whether it's the space shuttle or something else, only a few people will actually get to space or one satellite, or lots of satellites, but we'll get there. But there's an entire army of folks who are working behind the scenes diligently to make all those things happen.
Oh yeah, think about the Artemis and the planned launch, or a space shuttle launch, or a SpaceX launch, et cetera. There's and then looking beyond that, then there's this whole tourism aspect. Okay, we're hooked.
Yeah,
we love Nova Scotia. It's a tourism.
We're good Jeff Bezos here.
Yeah. We're whale watching on Digby Neck here just a couple of weeks ago, and we've been everywhere in Cape Breton, the Miners Museum, and everywhere in between, Skyline Trail, you name it. We're ambassadors for Nova Scotia. So this whole industry of the tourism industry that's already mature and capable for the people that are going to be coming here, not just with their launch vehicles or not with their satellites, but the people that want to watch rocket launches. I can't tell you, how many hundreds of emails I've gotten to people that are telling me where they're going to be on launch day, and it is going to be quite packed up in that area when we're
I think rockets. I might have to be one of these people.
This would be good viewing for sure.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't even actually thought about kind of the space tourism sort of opportunity. When I was a kid, I used to go to live in Washington D.C. and I used to go to National Airport, and there was a little park, and you could lay down in the grass and watch all the planes take off. Yeah, and you get the rush of the wind of the turbines like rumbling as it's going over you. But I can imagine probably watching a rocket launch is probably way more exciting. And probably, maybe not everybody is a Jeff Bezos, who wants to be launched into space. But, I think Nova Scotia could be an ideal destination for things like that. We have kind of all of the other things that would just be the icing on the cake. So maybe we'll get there one day. One day. Well, you talked a little bit. Just have a couple more questions for you. You talked a little bit about all of the the people that are involved in kind of supporting the space industry, supporting the satellite industry. And I know we've talked, at Onside, we're really interested in fostering inclusive, innovation-driven entrepreneurship. We love hearing about really advanced tech industries such as this. And one thing we're, looking at is trying to think about how these kinds of industries can be a bit more inclusive, so that whether it's folks from rural communities or women or BIPOC people, what are your thoughts about getting more inclusion into this industry?
Oh, I think it's already happening, and I think it's paramount that it continue. And I'm a father of 6 daughters, so it's a personal to me in many ways. My partner Ann and I are very engaged in making sure opportunity is there for our kids, and I think it is happening. I look across the Canadian Space Agency president is Lisa Campbell, and we have astronauts from Canada, Roberta Bondar, and people like that. Even our deputy prime minister. I mean, everybody fits into that bill of really providing some foundation for future opportunity to grow, and that includes this industry as well. There's a lot of the kids that I met up in Canso. Most of them that were asking questions, I'll tell you, were girls, and they're asking probing deep questions about deep space activities and satellites and internet and connectivity and things like that. The boys were more bored. So from a personal engagement perspective, as late as this past June, I think it's really that opportunity is there for inclusiveness for sure.
That's awesome. Well, I love to hear that. I love to hear that the girls are asking lots of questions. So that's really great. My last question for you for our session is one that we like to ask a lot of our guests, which is around whether or not entrepreneurship or becoming an entrepreneur, whether you think that is something that is nurtured or does that come about because of nature? What do you think?
To me, it's clearly nurtured, and it's important. It fits with your previous question as well. There's some natural nurturing that presents opportunities for certain segments of our society. I'm a white man in America, right, if you will. And so which base am I on when I started my nurturing path to build out? And the challenges for, BIPOC and women and First Nations community members, et cetera. It's also about nurturing for them too, but they're starting at home plate and having to go around the bases. It's not really starting at third and going home. So it is nurturing, but it's really important that we empower, we provide mentorship opportunities and role models for them to really grab onto, to take hold of that and make it happen. Sadly, it's still a harder slog for many people to nurture that entrepreneurial spirit and make it happen. But it is happening. I would point to the CEO for Bayside Development for the Bakken Keck. Rose Paul is the CEO there, and one of the leadership of the Fisheries Association in Canso, Jenny Boudreau, Sarah McLean with the group here with Maritime Launch. I look personally at my family with my wife as a mechanical engineer, and her mom was an especially wonderful example, for my kids that has produced other mentors and leaders in the community, medical doctors and emergency rooms in Cincinnati, for example. So I really think it is nurturing, but I think it's we need to do more to make sure that opportunity is for everyone equally as much as possible. And if the pendulum has to swing to catch up, that's okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Steve, I really appreciate all your time that you spent with us today to talk about maritime launch, what's happening in Nova Scotia, what's happening in the space industry, and to hear some of your thoughts around how we can create more space and get this industry to be even more inclusive and heading in the right direction. If people want to learn more about maritime launch, because there's so many interesting things happening, what's the best way that people can learn about what you're doing in your company?
Well, we have got maritimelaunch.com, of course, is a website that you can go to. We've also got Spaceport Nova Scotia website as well. And that one's a little more community focused. It provides terms and conditions for a CLC meeting. It gives you a lot of the more internal workings of what's going on within the province, et cetera. So.
Okay, awesome. Well, with that, I'd like to thank you and thank all of our listeners for tuning in. You can learn more about OnSide on our website. You can check out our Inclusive Innovation Monitor, which is also on our website. And please like and subscribe to our podcast. And as we come to a close, I'd really like to thank Communities, Culture, and Heritage for your support. We're so grateful for your support in helping us make this podcast. Thank you very much.
This has been a Podstarter production.